Hey guys, Ryzen here. In this video, I'm going to talk about the first day of ceremony at Soltara. Welcome to the channel. On this channel, you'll find meditation mixes, original art, and talks inspired by psychedelic experiences just like this one. So let's jump right in. So I had gone to an ayahuasca retreat before in Peru about 2 years ago. There, my intention was to get over the trauma inflicted by my father. When we were kids, my father beat us almost every day. Sometimes he'd beat me so hard that I couldn't even walk. Sometimes I'd have trouble speaking because of a swollen lip. So I carried a lot of sadness and hurt within myself. This sadness and hurt came out in various ways. It came out in anger, in unhappiness, sadness, or unresponsiveness to those around me. So after the first round of ceremonies there in Peru, I felt like the sessions were pretty much successful. After those sessions, I felt happier, lighter, and more inspired. Again, that was about 2 years ago. Over the last 2 years though, although I did notice a change within me, I also noticed a lingering darkness inside. For example, sometimes I'd lose my temper with my partner or my family. I then check in inside to see if it was related to the trauma enacted by my father. And I realized, although I had forgiven him and I was no longer angry at him, there was still just a general lingering anger inside of me, ingrained in me from so many years of abuse. It was kind of a blind rage, the blind rage of someone who had grown up in a very angry environment. So I had a few intentions for wanting to do ceremony again. But another intention I had was to finally forgive myself so that I could be kinder to myself and be kinder and more loving to the people around me. I had come to a conclusion that being at Soltara and undergoing another round of ayahuasca ceremonies might be helpful. And so I booked my 3-day ayahuasca retreat at Soltara. On the first day of ceremony, the schedule went like this. And the nice thing about being at Soltara is they always posted the schedule up in the kitchen. So at 7 a.m. we had the Vomitivo, where we would drink so much lemongrass liquid that we would purge out in the forest just to empty our stomachs and to prepare for the ceremony that first night. At 9 a.m. we would have a very light breakfast. At 10 a.m. we would have an ayahuasca orientation talk. At 12:30 p.m. we would have medical checks where they would check us for COVID and just to make sure that we were in general health in order to participate in the ceremony that night. 1 p.m. would be lunch. 4:30 p.m. would be the flower baths, where I believe the purpose was to protect us during ceremony and to serve as a sort of initiation into the next week of ceremonies. At 6:30, we would then all meet in the Maloka for some pre-ceremony yoga. And finally at 7:30, the first ceremony would begin. So, 7 a.m., we started the day off early with the Vomitivo experience. To do this, we met near the Maloka, which I can only describe as a really huge, gigantic hut made out of wood and straw, or it had a straw ceiling. And we met by the woods near the Maloka. And there we would drink as much lemongrass tea as we could until we started puking. And what's interesting about the experience is we had to drink as much as we could, as fast as we could, so that we would vomit from volume alone. Hence the name Vomitivo. There were 3 stations total, and each person would have to choose a station or wait in line for a station for their turn to drink the tea and to puke into the woods. And each station had a facilitator or a puking coach who encouraged each one of us to keep drinking and to puke into the woods. I believe the motto was, drink, don't think. At first, I felt a little anxious that I wouldn't be able to puke right away, especially since on a regular basis, I do drink a lot of water. And it turns out that I needed to drink at least 6 very tall pint glass sized glasses of lemongrass tea before I could even start puking out massive amounts of liquid. After my 6 very tall glasses of the lemongrass tea, I was able to puke out massive amounts of liquid, and I went to go sit back down, but then I realized there was a little tiny bit left in my stomach. And after my turn, I had to run off to another side of the Maloka where nobody was, and I finished puking the rest of the content out there. Now, to undertake this activity, I didn't really feel scared. I just felt a little anxious that I would not be able to puke right away. And what was helpful was there was a facilitator there named Jessica who was cheering me on while I drank the liquid, and that finally helped me purge out most of it. After the Vomitivo experience, I felt great. I felt a lot lighter, I had a lot of energy, and I was ready to undertake the rest of the day. At about 9 a.m., we had a very delicious and light breakfast consisting of tropical fruits such as papaya. There was also watermelon, and if I remember correctly, there was some bread thing made out of squash. There was watermelon juice, as well as cucumber water. I wasn't sure if I could eat after that Vomitivo experience, but surprisingly, I had an appetite and I was very hungry. So I ended up stuffing my face full of delicious breakfast fruit. At about 10 a.m., we had our Ayahuasca Talk, in which there were several facilitators. There were about 4 facilitators from the center, as well as the shaman couple. The shaman couple consisted of a husband and wife duo I believe one of them was Maestro Amerigo and the other one was Maestra Olga. During this session, the entire group talked to us about various topics such as Ayahuasca ceremony etiquette, such as don't invade another person's bed. Some people may have visions and some may not. Regardless, healing comes in many forms. Purging comes in many forms. In addition to the traditional ways of purging, such as puking, purging may come in the way of sweat or excessive phlegm, for example. And participants, in respect for the shamans, should not leave the ceremony before the shamans had concluded the ceremony. I'm not going to go through all the points here. I just wanted to give a few examples of the very useful and helpful topics that they covered during this ayahuasca talk. After the ayahuasca talk, we had this period for individual medical checks with the doctor. So each one of us was assigned a certain time where we would have to see the doctor, and this happened from about 12:30 to 1 p.m. The reason for these medical checks was to ensure that, for example, I didn't have COVID and that I wouldn't spread COVID to anybody else in the ceremony, and that I was in general good health to participate in the ceremony. At 1 p.m. we had lunch, and it was another light buffet consisting of fruit and fresh vegetables and delicious fresh juices. All the food in Soltara, in general, the entire time, was tasty and delicious. After lunch, we had a little bit of downtime, and the participants could have used this time to do anything. They could have gone to the beach or hang out by the pool. I chose to use the time to further develop my intentions for the ceremony that night. I also used it to meditate as well as take a nap to ensure that I had plenty of energy for the upcoming ayahuasca ceremony. At around 4:30, we had to meet by the pool for flower baths. It was raining, so I had to use one of the long Soltara umbrellas to walk down from my room to the pool. And I made sure to dress up in my swim trunks because I knew that they were going to dump sacred flower water on us. When I arrived, the maestro and the maestra were preparing the flower bath. They were mixing in various flower petals as well as leaves into large buckets. From a distance, I could smell the fragrant, flowery smells from the baths, and they smelled great. Since I arrived there first, I felt very excited, and I knew that we were all in for a magical experience, especially since it was raining. It's not every day that one gets the opportunity to undertake a sacred flower bath from two shamans in the pouring rain. It was a very special experience. Since I was the first one there, I volunteered to undertake the bath first. So I took off my t-shirt, I sat on a bench in just my swim trunks, and I got dumped with flower water. And the water wasn't too cold, but it was cold enough where I couldn't stop laughing. And the brew itself, or the flower bath itself, smelled really good. It smelled fantastic. After the bath, it was important that I didn't take a shower. Nobody was allowed to take a shower. We all had to just let the flower bath dry on our skins. We could change our clothes and towel down, but we couldn't towel down regularly, or vigorously. We had to just pat dry ourselves and change into new clothes so that most of the flower bath concoction stayed and coated our bodies. After the flower bath, I walked back to my room, and in preparation for the ceremony that night, I did various things. I did a mindfulness meditation, followed by a loving kindness meditation, followed by a rosary, followed by a white light protection meditation. Oh, and at some point I did an artist way empty mind meditation technique where you write down all your thoughts on paper until your mind is completely clear. And did I need to do all those things? Who knows? But it definitely made me feel a lot better and way prepared for this upcoming ceremony that night. At 6:30, we met at the Maloka for some pre-ceremony yoga, and the instructor had a very low and slow voice. She calmly guided us through various yoga poses to get our bodies and our minds ready for the ceremony that night. Because we had to stay on our individual ayahuasca or ceremony beds, most of the yoga poses were actually just done on our backs. We stretched and worked out a lot of the kinks in our bodies. Well, I obviously can't speak for the other people, but I stretched a lot and I felt like the yoga was able to work out a lot of the kinks in my body, at least. After the yoga, we now all sat in silence and in anticipation for the start of the ayahuasca ceremony. So, at about 7:30, the shamans came in and sat down. The facilitators also joined them. They all sat in the middle of the Maloka. We, the participants, all sat along the edge wall of the Maloka. Starting in what seemed like an arbitrary spot in the circle, which we participants formed, the facilitators called a single participant up to receive the brew. We were each called up in counterclockwise order. Since it was the first night, we each received a customary 1 dose, which I believe was about 3 ounces to start. When I sat in the center to receive my dose, I first silently recited my intentions in my head, and then I blew them into my cup of ayahuasca, and then I drank the brew with my intentions down. From my previous experience, I had expected the brew to taste pretty bad, but this brew actually tasted gentler, kind of like a thick, salty prune juice. I walked back to my mat. In my body, I felt a mild anxiety, but I curbed that feeling with other feelings of excitement, joy, and love. I surrendered lovingly to the experience. As I mentioned before, one of my intentions was to purge out and get rid of the darkness, anger, shame, and guilt inside of me. About 20 minutes into the experience, the visual started. Fantastic towers were being built out of swirling geometric shapes. I saw a colorful carnival type world, and rainbows swirled through dark trees. After about a half hour of solid HD, beautiful, clear, crisp visuals, the nausea started, and I started dry heaving into my bucket. I could see black clouds of darkness come out of my mouth into the green bucket. I felt happy that I started the process of purging out the darkness. Then the nausea intensified. I started puking out a dark, viscous liquid. Along with the liquid, I puked out huge black worms. I also had to crap out the darkness. So I called the facilitator to help me go to the bathroom outside of the Maloka. When I stood up, I was very weak. I felt like a weak little baby. I walked like a weak little baby. The facilitator had to hold my arm the entire way as I took tiny steps to the bathroom. In the bathroom, I released more giant worms from my body. The facilitator then walked me back to my small bed. From there, I continued to purge. I also had visions of black smoke rising up from my body to the center ceiling of the Maloka, out into the sky. In the sky was a giant tree with roots for teeth which chewed up the smoke. The tree then converted the smoke to wavy rays of light released in various beautiful colors into the stars. After this huge purge, I felt a little better. As the night progressed, I only kept seeing dark visions. I kept seeing the same geometric patterns, but a smoke covered everything. I felt that this was an indicator that I was not done with the darkness. I dreaded going back up to the center of the Maloka, but I knew I had to continue to do the work. So I used the red flashlight provided by the center to shine a red light on me. I asked the facilitator to walk me back up to the center for another dose. I asked for about a quarter cup. I almost threw up in front of the facilitator. He placed a bucket in front of me, and I dry heaved clouds of darkness into the bucket. I said my intention, and I blew it into the cup, and I downed the brew. At some point in the night, these beings started performing surgery on me. I was super weak lying on my cot when several arms came out of the sky and cut me open and started pulling out balls of darkness and throwing them aside. And they started putting back balls of glowing light. This actually felt really good and cleansing. Back at my bed, I continued to purge the entire night, releasing dark black shadow worms and bugs into the bucket. I was in really bad shape. I felt super nauseous, and I felt like I was going to die. At some point, the ceremony ended, but I felt still super bad and super sick. So one of the facilitators said I could stay in the Maloka. Everyone but a couple of other participants left. I felt all alone in the big, dark space. I could hear the jungle sounds, which sounded alive and reassuring, but the giant, empty Maloka also felt a little creepy. I purged some more, and then at some point I decided to walk back up hill to my room. About a 20th way up the hill, I had the overwhelming urge to use the bathroom. So I hobbled back down to the bathrooms where I released more black, foul, oozing insects from my body. I then tried to hobble back up the hill again. Every few steps, I stopped to either puke or catch my breath. It felt very hard. I felt like crying. Actually, I probably cried a few times along the way up the hill. At some point, one of the facilitators came out of what felt like a random house, and he saw me struggling. So for a few steps, he followed me back up the hill until he knew I was going to be safe and make it. When I finally got back to my room, I was drenched in sweat. The night was very hot, but the cold air conditioner in the room felt amazing. I puked some more in the bathroom in the room. I felt so gross that I had to take a shower. I think I might have puked in the shower. Finally, I made it back to bed and passed out. And that was the end of the first day of ceremony. That's the end of this video. If you liked it, please consider giving it a like or hitting the subscribe button. Or consider sticking around on the channel to listen to some music and enjoy some original art. I will continue covering the rest of the retreat in future videos, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching. I'm Ryzen. I'll see you later.